Lagos is a city that never sleeps. Cars honk from morning to night, markets buzz with voices, and the streets are always full of movement. In the middle of this busy city, there stood a great mansion. Its tall white walls shone in the sun, its gate was guarded, and its compound was filled with flowers and trees from faraway lands. Inside that mansion lived a couple, Aliya and Mr. Johnson. From the outside, people thought their lives were perfect. They had cars of every kind, big jeeps, shining saloon cars, and even a driver to take them anywhere they wanted. Their house had everything: soft chairs that swallowed you when you sat down, lights that could brighten the darkest night, and a kitchen filled with all kinds of food. Servants moved up and down, cooks prepared delicious meals, and gardeners made sure the flowers never withered. Yes, to the eyes of the world, Aliya and Mr. Johnson were truly blessed, but inside their hearts, there was an emptiness. For many years, Aliya and Mr. Johnson longed for a child. Every night, Aliya would look at the empty rooms in the mansion and sigh. The rooms were big, painted in soft colors, but they remained quiet like a graveyard. She would touch the small baby clothes she had once bought in hope, and tears would fall from her eyes. Mr. Johnson, though a strong and wealthy man, also carried sorrow in his heart. He would watch children running in the streets of Lagos, children with their school bags, shouting and laughing, and his heart would sink. He too wanted to hear a little voice call him Daddy. As the Bible says in Psalm 127, verse 3, "Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from Him." Each time Mr. Johnson heard that verse in church, his heart would tighten, for he had everything: houses, cars, money. But the heritage from the Lord was missing in his life. Aliya visited many doctors. They went to private hospitals in Victoria Island, spoke to the best gynecologists in Lagos, even traveled abroad for tests. The answer was always the same: Aliya could not conceive. She also visited prayer houses. Prophets laid hands on her, poured oil on her head, and declared that her womb would open. She fasted, she prayed, she cried, but year after year passed, and no child came. A Nigerian proverb says, "A home without a child is like a farm without rain." That was exactly how they felt, rich in everything else, but dry in their hearts. Sometimes Aliya would wake up in the night and sit by the window. She would look outside at the city lights and whisper, "God, why me? What did I do to deserve this pain?" In Lagos society, people talk. Neighbors whispered behind her back. Some said she had sinned. Others said maybe she had offended her ancestors. She carried shame everywhere she went. At weddings, when children danced around their parents, she would smile on the outside but cry on the inside. One day, after returning from a friend's baby dedication, Aliya broke down. She threw her wrapper on the floor, sat in the middle of their large living room, and wept bitterly. "Johnson," she said between sobs, "what is the use of all this wealth if we have no child to call our own? When we die, who will carry our name? Who will inherit our sweat?" Mr. Johnson bent down, wiped her tears, and held her hand. "Aliya, my love, don't cry. We are not the first, and we will not be the last. God's time is the best. But if God has chosen not to give us a child by birth, maybe He is pointing us to another way." Aliya looked at him with swollen eyes. "What do you mean?" That was when Mr. Johnson first spoke about adoption. "There are many children out there," he said gently. "Children who have no father, no mother. Children abandoned by life. If we cannot bring forth one by blood, can we not bring forth one by love? Does the Bible not say in James 1:27, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress. Aliya was silent. She had never thought of adoption. In Nigerian culture, people sometimes look down on adopted children, saying, "He is not the real son," or "She is not her blood." Aliya feared what people would say, but in her heart, she knew her husband was right. That night, she did not sleep. She thought of the empty rooms, the unused baby clothes, the quiet halls of their mansion. She thought of how her husband's face lit up when he spoke of adoption. The next morning, she whispered, "If it will make you happy, Johnson, then let us try." Her husband smiled for the first time in many weeks. He held her face and said, "Thank you, Aliya. You will not regret this. The child may not come from your womb, but he can still come into your heart." A week later, Mr. Johnson took Aliya to St. Elizabeth Catholic Orphanage. The building was old but neat, painted cream and brown. Children played in the yard, some barefoot, others in old sandals. Their laughter filled the air. The moment Aliya stepped inside, she felt a strange mix of emotions: pity, sorrow, and hope. The children ran around, some tugging at her dress, others staring curiously. A nun, Sister Agnes, welcomed them warmly. She listened to their story and nodded. "You have come to the right place," she said. "Here, we have children who long for love, children who pray every night for a family." Adoption is not only about giving them a home, it is also about giving them a future. As she spoke, a boy sat quietly under a mango tree at the corner of the yard. He was about 13 years old, wearing a faded shirt and shorts. His eyes were deep, filled with sadness, but also a hidden strength. He did not play with the other children. Instead, he hugged his knees and watched silently. "Who is that boy?" Mr. Johnson asked. Sister Agnes smiled softly. "That is Bello. He came here many years ago after losing both parents. He is a quiet boy, respectful, but very lonely. Few people choose older children like him because most want babies. But I tell you, Bello has a good heart." The moment Mr. Johnson looked at Bello, something stirred in him. It was as if his heart whispered, "This is the one." Aliya, however, was unsure. She had imagined adopting a baby, someone she could raise from childhood. But Bello was already 13, already grown in his ways. Could she love him as her own? But as she watched him, she noticed the way his eyes carried pain, the way he looked lost among the crowd of children. Something softened in her heart. Aliya's eyes grew wet. Maybe this boy was meant for them. After much discussion and prayer, Aliya and Mr. Johnson decided to adopt Bello. Papers were signed, blessings were given, and Bello was told he now had a family. The boy could hardly believe it. For years, he had watched other children leave with new parents while he remained behind. Now, at last, it was his turn. Tears filled his eyes as he whispered, "Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ma." That day, when Bello stepped into their shining car and looked out of the tinted windows at the orphanage fading behind him, he felt both joy and fear. Joy, because he finally had a family. Fear, because he did not know what the future would hold. Mr. Johnson placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "From today, you are my son, and I will be your father." Aliya forced a smile. Her heart was uncertain, but she chose silence. The car ride from St. Elizabeth Orphanage back to their mansion in Lagos felt like a dream to Bello. He had never sat in such a big car before. The soft seats swallowed his small body, and the air conditioning felt like cold morning breeze on his skin. He kept looking through the window, at the tall buildings and busy streets. All his life, he had only known the walls of the orphanage, the smell of beans and rice served in steel plates, and the sound of children crying at night. Now, he was going to a new life. Mr. Johnson was excited, smiling like a man who had found treasure. He asked Bello questions about his life, his school, his friends. Bello answered in short words, his voice shaky because he was shy. Aliya sat quietly, only nodding sometimes. She was not as excited as her husband, but she kept her feelings to herself. When they reached the mansion, Bello's eyes opened wide. He had never seen such a house. The walls were painted bright white, the windows tall like glass towers, and the compound spread wide with flowers and trees. It was bigger than the whole orphanage he had left behind. The gate opened, and the car rolled inside like a king entering his palace. The workers in the house came out, curious to see the new boy. The driver carried Bello's small bag, which contained the only clothes he owned. One of the cooks whispered to the gardener, "Is this the boy they brought from the orphanage?" The gardener nodded. "Yes, I think so." Their voices carried that quiet Lagos curiosity. Mr. Johnson held Bello's hand and led him into the house. "From today, this is your home," he said warmly. Bello's heart jumped. For the first time in his life, someone had called a place his home. The mansion was full of wonders to him. The floors shone like mirrors, the chairs were soft and wide, and the lights above his head were brighter than anything he had ever seen. He followed Mr. Johnson like a small shadow, afraid to step wrongly. Aliya walked behind them, her face calm, though inside her heart was heavy. Later that evening, they sat at the dining table. Food was served in silver plates, steaming hot. Rice, chicken, soup, and fruits lined the table. Bello looked at the food with wide eyes. At the orphanage, food was small and plain. Here, it looked like a feast. Mr. Johnson noticed his hesitation and said gently, "Eat, my son. There is enough here for you. A hungry stomach cannot hear the word of God." Bello picked up a spoon, his hands shaking, and ate slowly. Every bite tasted like a miracle. That night, a room was shown to him. The bed was large, covered in white sheets. He sat on it, not believing it was for him. The mattress swallowed his weight, so different from the hard bunk beds he had always known. As he lay down, tears rolled from his eyes, not of sadness, but of shock. He whispered, "God, if this is a dream, don't wake me." Sleep carried him away in peace. Days turned into weeks, and Bello began to adjust to his new life. He was taken to a good school in Lagos. His uniform was new, his shoes polished. Other children stared at him, some admiring, some mocking, because they had heard he was adopted. But Bello kept his head down. Mr. Johnson encouraged him every morning, saying, "Remember, education is the key that opens doors money cannot open." Bello would nod and walk into the school compound with hope. At home, things were different. Mr. Johnson grew closer to Bello each day. They talked, laughed, and even prayed together. He took Bello on weekend outings, bought him books, and sometimes they went to the beach where they walked barefoot in the sand. Johnson's heart was at rest. He felt his prayers had been answered. But Aliya's heart began to twist in small ways. She noticed how her husband smiled more when Bello was around. She saw how he bought the boy clothes and gave him time that once belonged only to her. At night, when she lay beside her husband, she sometimes asked, "Do you still love me the same?" He would laugh and say, "Of course, Aliya. You are my wife, my crown. But can you not see? God has finally blessed us. Should we not rejoice?" Aliya forced a smile. but inside she felt a small stone of jealousy beginning to grow. She told herself it was nothing, but it was there. One Sunday in church, the pastor spoke about love and family. He read from Romans 8:15. "The Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship, and by him we cry, Abba, Father." Mr. Johnson smiled and squeezed Bello's shoulder, as if to say, "You see, even the Bible speaks of adoption." Bello smiled shyly, but Aliya's eyes grew dim. To her, the word adoption sounded like a shadow always following her, reminding her that Bello was not her blood. Still, life moved on. Months passed, and Bello grew healthier, stronger, and more confident. The workers in the house began to respect him because of his humble nature. He greeted everyone politely, never wasted food, and even helped the gardener with small chores. "This boy is different," the cook once said. "He has the heart of someone who knows suffering." Mr. Johnson loved him more for that. He would sometimes sit with Bello in the study, teaching him about business and property. "One day, you must be wise," he told him. "Money can vanish like smoke, but wisdom remains." Bello listened carefully, soaking up every word. Aliya watched these lessons quietly from the doorway one evening. She saw the pride on her husband's face and the trust in his voice. She felt a chill in her chest. It was the same house she had lived in for years, but suddenly it felt like she was no longer the center of his world. One night, as she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, a thought crossed her mind. "If this boy takes over everything, what will be left for me?" She shook her head, pushing it away, but the thought returned again and again, like an echo in her heart. Bello had now stayed long enough in the Johnsons' mansion to no longer feel like a stranger. He had his own room, his own bed, his own clothes neatly folded in the wardrobe. Each morning he woke up to the sound of birds singing in the trees around the compound, and he felt thankful that his life had changed. At school, he was doing well, though some children still teased him and called him orphan boy. But Bello had learned to hold his tongue. He remembered Mr. Johnson's advice: "Do not fight with words, fight with your future." Mr. Johnson's love for the boy grew every day. He often returned from work with books, sometimes footballs, and sometimes just a simple chocolate bar. "My son, take," he would say, smiling as Bello's eyes lit up. In the evenings, they would sit in the study. Mr. Johnson taught him about history, money, and even how to speak politely to elders. He wanted Bello to become a great man, not just a rich man. "It is better to have a good name than to have silver and gold," he said one evening, quoting from Proverbs 22:1. Bello nodded quietly, understanding little by little what it meant. But Aliya's eyes began to see things differently. She noticed how her husband spoke less to her and more to the boy. She noticed that whenever Bello entered the room, Mr. Johnson's face lit up like a lamp. At first she thought it was only her imagination, but soon it became too clear. Jealousy does not grow loud in one day. It begins as a whisper, then it turns into a voice, and finally it becomes a scream inside the heart. She started to feel like an outsider in her own home. Sometimes at the dining table, Johnson would ask Bello about his school and his friends, laughing at his small stories, while Aliya sat in silence. If she tried to speak, her husband would only nod quickly and return to Bello. One night, she turned in bed and asked, "Johnson, am I still enough for you?" He laughed softly and touched her hand. "Of course, my wife. You are everything to me, but can you not see the joy this boy has brought us?" His words did not calm her. They dug deeper into her wound. Rumors from outside made it worse. Some friends whispered in her ear, Be careful, Aliya. Adopted children sometimes forget where they came from. Tomorrow, he may take everything and leave you empty." Aliya smiled faintly when they said such words, but in her heart, the seed of fear was planted. Mr. Johnson, full of trust and love, went to meet lawyers. He began to arrange his documents so that by the time Bello turned 18, most of his properties would be transferred into his name. "I want this boy to stand firm, even if I am no more," he told the lawyer. To him, it was the right thing. Bello was the son God had given him, not by blood, but by choice. Aliya discovered this plan one afternoon when she entered the study and found papers spread on the desk. She read the lines and saw Bello's name repeated over and over. Her heart froze. She felt the blood rush to her head. So this is his plan? To give everything to this boy and leave me with nothing? That evening, she served Johnson his meal in silence. Her face was calm, but inside her mind, a storm was brewing. Johnson, unaware of her thoughts, talked cheerfully to Bello about his future. "When you are grown, you will not suffer as I did when I was young. You will not beg. You will not struggle. You will carry this family's name with honor." Bello smiled, shy as always. Aliya watched them with cold eyes. In the days that followed, she began to treat Bello differently. Her once forced smile disappeared. She no longer asked him about his school, no longer cared if he ate or not. If he greeted her, she answered with a short nod. The workers noticed, but kept quiet. Children are quick to sense hearts, and Bello soon felt it too. He tried to stay out of her way, spending more time with Mr. Johnson. But inside, he was confused. He wondered if he had done something wrong. One rainy evening, when thunder rolled across the sky, Bello sat by the window, hugging his knees. He whispered to himself, "Maybe Mama Aliya does not want me here. Maybe I am still just an orphan." Tears filled his eyes, but he wiped them away quickly. He remembered the words of the psalm they had read in church. "Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me." He held on to that verse like a rope in the storm of his heart. Aliya, however, was slipping deeper into darkness. She felt that her husband's love was no longer hers. She felt that her life security was under threat. In her mind, Bello was no longer an innocent boy. He was an enemy, a thief who had come to steal her husband and her future. Nigerians say, "When jealousy enters the heart, it blinds the eyes." Aliya was now blind. She could not see Bello's innocence. She could not see Johnson's good intentions. All she could see was her fear of losing everything. And in that blindness, her mind began to think of things she would never have considered before. The air in the Johnsons' mansion began to change. To visitors and neighbors, everything looked the same. The tall gates still opened every morning. The cars still moved in and out, and the flowers in the compound still blossomed. But inside the house, there was a silence that carried weight. Aliya spoke less, her smiles became fewer, and her eyes were often distant. Mr. Johnson was too busy with work and his plans for Bello's future to notice the storm brewing in his wife's heart. Every day after work, he would sit with Bello, showing him files, teaching him about properties, and explaining how companies run. One day, he told him, "This will all be yours. You must learn now, so you will not be cheated later." Bello, though still young, listened carefully. He did not fully understand the depth of those words, but he trusted his father's voice. Aliya heard those words too, and each one was like a knife to her chest. She would stand in the hallway, listening unseen, her hands tightening into fists. This boy, this hopeless boy who came with nothing, now being given everything I helped to build. Her thoughts grew darker each day. One afternoon, she entered the study after Mr. Johnson had left for a meeting. Papers lay scattered on the desk. Curiosity led her to open one of the files. What she saw made her chest burn. It was a legal document, already signed, showing that when Bello turned 18, most of Johnson's properties, houses, lands, even shares in companies would automatically be transferred to his name. Her own name appeared only in passing, like a shadow. Her legs shook. She sat down, slowly, staring at the words again and again. It was not a mistake. Her husband truly intended to leave everything in the hands of an orphan. Anger boiled inside her. She thought of the nights she had cried because of childlessness, the shame she carried, the years she had stood beside him, building their wealth. And now, all of that was to be handed to Bello. That night, she served her husband dinner quietly. He ate happily, praising the food. Bello sat beside him, telling him about school. Aliya watched in silence. Her husband laughed at something Bello said, a laugh full of joy, a laugh she had not heard from him in years. In that moment, Aliya's decision hardened. She lay awake long after everyone had gone to bed. Her mind was restless, her heart racing. She remembered a saying her grandmother once told her, "Envy is a disease. If you do not cure it, it will cure you." She felt that disease spreading through her body, burning her thoughts. By morning, an idea had formed in her mind, an idea she had once thought impossible. If Mr. Johnson was gone, all the property would remain in her hands. Without him, there would be no one to give Bello anything. It was a wicked thought, but it refused to leave her. For days she fought within herself. She would look at her husband's kind face and feel shame, but then she would look at Bello and feel the fire of jealousy again. The struggle continued until one evening when she entered the kitchen. She opened the drawer where household chemicals were kept, poisons for rats, strong cleaning powders, and bottles with warning labels. She stared at them for a long time. Her hand trembled as she touched one of the bottles. It felt heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. Later that week, she prepared her husband's evening tea, as she always did. The cup was white, the steam rising in the air, but this time, she poured a little of the chemical inside, her hands shaking, her heart beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. She whispered to herself, "Forgive me, Lord, but I cannot allow my life's work to vanish." Mr. Johnson sat in the living room, reading the evening newspaper. Bello was upstairs, doing his homework. Aliya walked in calmly, placed the cup before her husband, and forced a smile. "Your tea," she said softly. "Thank you, my wife," Johnson replied warmly. He lifted the cup and drank without suspicion. For a moment, everything was still. Then his face twisted. He coughed, dropped the cup, and clutched his stomach. Pain shot through his body. His eyes widened as he looked at Aliya, confusion and fear mixing in them. "Aliya, what is this?" His voice was weak, broken. Aliya froze. Her heart screamed inside her chest, but her face remained hard. She could not answer. Johnson fell to the floor, struggling to breathe. His hand stretched out, as if begging for help, but no help came. Within minutes, his body grew still. The man who had built so much, who had loved so much, lay lifeless on the cold tiles. Bello rushed down when he heard the sound. "Daddy! Daddy!" he cried, running to his father's side. He shook him, but Johnson did not move. Tears burst from the boy's eyes as he screamed for help. Workers rushed in, some crying, some shocked. But Aliya stood aside, her face pale, her mind racing. The house fell into mourning. Friends came, pastors came, neighbors came. They all wept for the good man who had died so suddenly. They said it was sickness, a sudden attack, for no one suspected the truth. Bello cried day and night, refusing to eat, refusing to smile. The only father he had ever known was gone. Aliya wore black, her face calm, her voice low, pretending to share the sorrow. But in her heart, she felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Relief, because she now stood alone with the wealth. Emptiness, because she knew the path she had chosen could never be reversed. The Bible says in Galatians 6:7, "Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows." But Aliya did not think of that verse. She only thought of her next step, what to do with Bello. The mansion felt like a grave after Mr. Johnson's death. The sound of his laughter, his footsteps in the halls, his voice calling for Bello, all of it was gone. The workers moved about quietly, speaking in whispers. Bello cried every night, his small body shaking on the bed as he hugged his pillow. He could not understand why the only father he had known had been taken away so suddenly. During the burial, people praised Mr. Johnson. Friends stood up one by one, talking about his kindness, his honesty, his generosity. Even people Bello had never seen before came, crying and saying, "This man helped me when I had nothing." Bello wept bitterly, wishing he could have just one more day with him. But Aliya's heart was not on the burial. As the mourners went home, her mind was already on the properties. She sat with lawyers, going through documents. She nodded quietly, hiding her fear when they reminded her that most of the property was in Bello's name and would be released to him when he turned 18. Inside, she burned with anger. She thought to herself, "I cannot allow this. This boy will not inherit what I built with my husband. I will not let him take it from me." At first, she tried to control her anger by ignoring Bello. She stopped talking to him. If he greeted her, she gave no reply. If he sat near her, she moved away. The boy felt unwanted, but he tried to keep peace. He thought maybe she was only mourning in her own way. He did not know her heart had turned completely against him. One afternoon, Bello came to her in the living room, holding his school bag. "Mama Aliya," he said softly, "I miss Daddy so much. Please don't be angry with me. I want us to be happy again." His innocent words only made her heart harder. She turned to him with cold eyes. "You are not my son. Do not call me that again." Bello froze, his small lips trembling. He wanted to cry, but the tears stuck in his throat. He slowly walked back to his room, each step heavy like a stone. From that day, the house was no longer a home for him. It was a cage. Aliya's cruelty grew stronger. She ordered the workers not to serve Bello food unless she said so. Sometimes the boy went to bed hungry, his stomach crying louder than his mouth. When he asked for money for school, she said, "Go and beg on the street. That is where you belong." The once loving mansion turned into a place of torment. Bello remembered the words of Mr. Johnson. "Do not fight with words. Fight with your future." But how could he fight when he was only 13, alone and unwanted? He cried at night, whispering prayers. "God, help me. I have no one but you." Aliya's decision was final. Bello had to be removed completely. One morning, she told him to pack his few clothes into a small bag. She said, "We are going for a drive." The boy's heart jumped. He thought maybe she was taking him somewhere better. Maybe she had forgiven him. He quickly packed his bag, smiling faintly, hoping for peace. The car rolled out of Lagos, passing busy markets, tall buildings, and crowded bus stops. Bello looked through the window, silent but curious. He noticed they were going farther than usual. Hours passed, the roads became narrower, the buildings fewer, and finally they entered a place where tall trees lined both sides. The sound of birds replaced the noise of traffic. "Mama Aliya, where are we going?" he asked softly. She did not answer. Her face was like stone, her eyes straight on the road. At last, they reached a thick forest near a small village called Kokodi. She stopped the car, stepped out, and ordered Bello to get down. The boy obeyed, though confusion filled his face. "Where are we?" he asked again, clutching his bag. Aliya opened the boot and pulled his bag out, dropping it on the ground. "This is where you will stay," she said coldly. "Do not ever come back. Lagos is not your place. This is your home now." Bello's eyes widened in shock. "Mama Aliya, please, don't leave me here. I don't know this place. Please, I will be good." His voice shook as tears ran down his cheeks. He fell to his knees, begging, but Aliya turned her face away. Without another word, she entered the car and slammed the door. The engine roared, and the car rolled away, leaving a cloud of dust behind. Bello ran after it for a short distance, screaming, "Please don't leave me." But the car disappeared into the distance. Silence fell around him. Only the sound of crickets and the rustle of leaves remained. He looked at the small bag by his feet and then at the endless trees around him. His legs felt weak, his chest tight. He sank to the ground and cried until his voice was gone. For the first time in his life, Bello was truly alone. The boy who once tasted the sweetness of a mansion now stood abandoned in the middle of a forest, hopeless and helpless. He remembered a verse the priest at the orphanage used to say, "When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I." He whispered it through his sobs, clinging to the only hope left, God's mercy. Night was approaching, and fear gripped him. Strange sounds came from the trees, owl calls, rustling leaves, the snap of branches. He hugged his bag tightly, praying he would survive till morning. Back in Lagos, Aliya drove home with a strange satisfaction. She looked around the empty mansion and smiled faintly. "Now it is mine," she whispered. She began making plans to change all the documents, determined to erase Bello's name from everything. To her, the boy was gone forever, swallowed by the forest. She did not know that the story of Bello was only beginning, and the suffering she had planned for him would later become the very path that shaped his destiny. The sun was setting when Aliya's car disappeared into the distance, leaving Bello in the middle of the thick Kokodi forest. The sky turned from gold to red, and the shadows of the tall trees grew longer and darker. He hugged his small bag tightly and sat on the ground, not knowing what to do. The silence around him was heavy, broken only by the sound of birds returning to their nests and insects crying into the night. Fear crawled over him like ants. As the last light of day faded, the forest began to change. Strange noises rose from the darkness, rustling leaves, the low growl of unseen animals, and the echo of owls calling in the night. Bello trembled. His stomach was empty, his throat dry. But hunger and thirst were nothing compared to the fear of being alone in that wilderness. He tried to close his eyes, but sleep would not come. Every sound made him jump. The wind moved the branches above him, and he thought something was coming for him. His body shivered, not only from the cold, but also from terror. He whispered prayers, his lips dry. "God, please don't let me die here. Please." Hours felt like days. He sat awake through the night, hugging his knees, fighting tears, until his eyes grew swollen. Sometimes he would lie on the ground, but the hard earth gave him no comfort. Mosquitoes buzzed around, biting his arms and legs until they itched and burned. He slapped them weakly, but more came. The forest swallowed him in its cruelty. When the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Bello's eyes were red, his body weak, his clothes damp with night dew. He had not slept at all. His small stomach cried out in hunger, but there was nothing to eat. His lips cracked, his head heavy, but he forced himself to stand. He picked up his bag and stumbled toward a path he thought might lead to people. After walking for a long time, he reached the edge of a village, Kokodi. Smoke rose from clay kitchens, children played in the distance, and men carried tools to the farms. Bello felt a small relief at the sight of human life. He thought maybe someone would ask him who he was. Maybe someone would listen. But the moment villagers saw him walking in with dusty clothes, carrying a small bag, their faces changed. Women pulled their children closer. Men frowned and whispered to one another. "Who is that boy?" one asked. "I have never seen him here before," another replied. His presence spread unease. When he tried to greet, "Good morning," the women turned their backs. When he came near, people stepped away, as if he carried a disease. Children pointed at him and laughed, "Stranger, stranger." Their mothers quickly hushed them and dragged them into their huts. By noon, the whole village knew a strange boy had entered from the forest. Rumors began to move faster than the wind. Some said, "Maybe he is a thief running from the city." Others whispered, "He could be a cursed child, abandoned for witchcraft." A few even murmured, "Perhaps he is a spirit sent to trouble us." Bello heard their whispers, and each word stabbed his heart. He wanted to shout that he was only a boy abandoned by his mother, but his voice felt trapped. He walked from one end of the village to the other, but every door was shut to him. His hunger grew worse, his legs shook, and his bag felt heavier than his body. As the day dragged on, regret filled his mind. He thought of the orphanage, the old walls, the simple food served in steel plates, the sound of other children around him. He thought of Sister Agnes, who sometimes patted his head and told him he had a good heart. Tears rolled down his face as he whispered to himself, "Why did they take me from there? If only Mama Aliya had just returned me there instead of bringing me here. At least I would not be alone." He remembered the soft bed in the mansion, the warm meals, the smiles of Mr. Johnson. His heart twisted with pain. The memory of the man who had loved him felt like a dream too good to be true. He wished he could wake up and find Mr. Johnson alive again, calling him "my son." But the reality around him was harsh. He was no one's son, no one's family, only a stranger in a village that feared him. As the sun set again, Bello sat under a tree at the edge of the village, his face buried in his knees. His body was weak, his stomach empty, and his heart broken. The voices of villagers still carried to his ears suspicion, fear, rejection. He was alive, but he felt as if he had been buried alive. That night was waiting again, darker than the first. And Bello knew he would have to face it alone, with nothing but his tears, his regrets, and his small prayers that seemed to vanish into the empty sky. Due to the hunger that had eaten away his strength, Bello could not stay awake that second night. Under the same tree, where he had cried the whole day, his body grew weaker until his eyes rolled back and he collapsed. His breathing became shallow, his lips dry like paper. The forest wind moved around him. The stars shone faintly above, but he was no longer aware. That was how Uncle Gogo found him. The old man, bent in the back and moving with a slow stick, had heard the rumors Throughout the day, people whispered about a strange boy who had come from the forest, a boy they feared was cursed. But while others rejected him, Uncle Gogo's heart was restless. He could not sit and do nothing. He was old, toothless, and poor, but he still carried a kindness that many younger men had lost. So, when darkness fell, he went to the tree at the edge of the village. There, under the branches, he saw Bello lying motionless, his chest rising and falling slowly. The old man's eyes filled with pity. "Ah, this child will die if no one helps him," he muttered to himself. Using his stick for balance, he bent low, lifted Bello's weak body with all the strength he had left, and carried him across the quiet path to his small hut. The hut was old, its roof patched with grass, its walls leaning slightly, but it was warm inside. Uncle Gogo laid Bello on a mat and quickly prepared a little mixture of herbs he had used all his life. He boiled water, mashed leaves, and made a bitter drink. He also brought a small bowl of soft porridge. Nothing much, but enough to give life back. Slowly, he poured a little of the herbal water into Bello's mouth, then rubbed some on his chest. The boy coughed weakly, swallowing some of it. Hours passed, and at last, his eyes blinked open. Bello looked around, confused. He was lying on a mat, inside a hut he had never seen before. The air smelled of herbs and smoke. His body still felt weak, but his heart began to beat faster when he saw an old man seated beside him, watching with kind but tired eyes. Where am I?" Bello whispered, his voice dry. "You are safe, my son," Uncle Gogo answered softly. His voice was deep, cracked with age, yet gentle. "You were dying under the tree, but I brought you here. Do not fear. You are still alive." Bello's eyes filled with tears. He tried to sit up, but the old man touched his shoulder. No. Rest. Your body is weak. Eat small first, then talk." He gave him a spoon of the porridge. Bello swallowed slowly, his throat burning, but his stomach welcoming the food. He ate little by little until his strength began to return. When he was able to speak again, Uncle Gogo leaned close and asked, "Now, my son, tell me, who are you? Why did the whole village reject you today? What happened to you?" Bello looked down at his hands, shaking his head. "I did nothing wrong. They only fear me because I am a stranger. But I was not always here. I had a home before, in Lagos, a big house, with my father, Mr. Johnson. But he died. He died suddenly. His wife, Mama Aliya, she hated me after that. She said I was hopeless. She drove me far, far away and left me in the forest. She did not even take me back to the orphanage. She wanted me gone forever." His voice broke, and tears ran down his cheeks. Uncle Gogo listened quietly, his eyes deep in thought. He nodded slowly, as if the story touched a place inside him that was already wounded. The old man hummed. "So, this is how life has treated you. My son, the world is full of people who smile outside, but carry fire inside. You have suffered too young. But listen to me. Your story is not ending here." Bello wiped his tears with the back of his hand. "But why, Baba? Why me? If only they had left me in the orphanage, at least I would not suffer like this. Why did Mama Aliya hate me so much? What did I do wrong?" Uncle Gogo looked at him long and hard, his old eyes shining strangely. For a moment, he seemed to want to say something deeper, but he stopped himself. He only shook his head. "You did nothing wrong, my son. Sometimes when the river is too clear, people still call it dirty. The fault is not in the water, but in the eyes looking at it." Bello lay back, silent. His heart was heavy with confusion. but the words gave him a small comfort. Still, he noticed something in the old man's eyes, a secret, something unsaid, something waiting. Uncle Gogo placed a thin cloth over him and whispered, "Rest now. You need strength. Later, when the time is right, you will understand more. For now, know this, your life still has a journey. You will not end in this forest." As the fire in the corner of the hut burned low, Bello closed his eyes. His body, tired and weak, finally gave in to sleep. Uncle Gogo sat quietly beside him, staring into the flames. He carried in his heart a secret about the boy's life, a truth he recognized from Bello's story. But he said nothing yet. He only whispered to himself, "God's ways are deep. This boy is not here by mistake." And the night passed, with a weak boy sleeping under the roof of an old, bent man who carried more knowledge than his silence revealed. The days that followed were not easy for Bello, but they were different from the pain of his first arrival in Kokodi. After Uncle Gogo saved him from death under the tree, he slowly began to recover his strength. At first, he could not do much. His body was thin, his hands shaky, and his mind heavy with memories of Lagos. But the small hut gave him shelter, and the old man gave him just enough food and herbs to keep him alive. The villagers, however, still looked at him with suspicion. Even when they saw him walking beside Uncle Gogo, whispers followed him. "That's the boy who came from the forest," some said. Others spat on the ground when he passed. Children still called him stranger and ran away, laughing. It hurt him deeply, but with time, Bello learned to walk with his head bowed, ignoring the stares. Uncle Gogo encouraged him. "My son, people will always talk. Even if you walk on water, they will say it is because you cannot swim. Do not waste your strength on their words. Use it to build yourself." So, Bello began to help the old man with small tasks. At first, it was simple things, fetching water from the stream, gathering firewood, and sweeping the compound. But the more he worked, the more he realized how weak he still was. The first time he carried a bundle of firewood on his head, he staggered and dropped it halfway. His neck hurt, his back ached, and his arms trembled. He sat by the roadside, ashamed, thinking of the soft chairs in Lagos and the clean tiles of the mansion. "Why is life punishing me this way?" he whispered. But Uncle Gogo only laughed softly when Bello returned empty-handed. Strength is not given in a day. A tree does not grow tall in the morning and give shade by the evening. You will grow. Be patient. And slowly, Bello began to change. Months turned into years. His thin body filled out with muscle from farm work. His soft palms became hard and calloused from carrying hoes, machetes, and firewood. His back grew strong from bending over ridges in the farm, planting yam, cassava, and maize. The boy who once cried himself to sleep on white bedsheets in Lagos now slept on a mat, tired but satisfied that he had survived another day. By the time he was 15, Bello could carry a full bundle of firewood without shaking. He could fetch water in a heavy clay pot and walk the whole distance without stopping. Villagers began to notice his effort. Some who once mocked him started to nod when he passed. They did not smile, but at least they no longer whispered curses. The farm became his school. He learned when to plant yam, how to space the maize, when to clear weeds, and how to watch the sky for signs of rain. He learned to rise with the cockcrow and to return when the sun dipped low. He also learned hunger in a deeper way. There were days when harvest was poor, when he ate only roasted maize or wild fruits, but he no longer cried about it. He accepted it as part of life. Still, the memories of Lagos haunted him. At night, when Uncle Gogo snored beside the fire, Bello would lie awake and remember the shining floors of the mansion, the smell of fried chicken, the soft touch of Mr. Johnson's hand on his shoulder. He would bite his lips and swallow his tears. He often thought, if only Mama Aliya had just taken me back to the orphanage, at least I would have had other children around me. Now, even in this village, I am alone. When he turned 16, his body was almost that of a man. He was taller, his shoulders broader, and his face sharper. Yet the pain in his heart had not left. He carried it like a shadow. Whenever villagers looked at him with half acceptance, he remembered that he was still an outsider. But he did not let their rejection break him anymore. Instead, he worked harder, as if to prove to himself that he could survive. One day, while working in the farm, his hand blistered and bled from gripping the hoe. He dropped it and hissed in pain. Uncle Gogo, watching from a distance, called out, "Pain is not your enemy, Bello. Pain is the hammer that shapes iron into a strong blade. Endure it, and you will become something greater than you think." Bello wiped his sweat and picked up the hoe again, this time digging deeper into the earth. By the age of 17, Bello had become a full farmer. He could clear a bush in a day, plant ridges of yam, and harvest cassava roots without help. His muscles were defined, his skin darker from the sun, his eyes sharper from struggle. Some villagers who once rejected him now came secretly to ask him for help on their farms. They never called him family, but they respected his strength. He still faced hardship. Sometimes food was scarce. Sometimes sickness weakened him. Sometimes loneliness cut him like a knife. But each hardship added another layer of strength to his life. He no longer asked, "Why me?" Instead, he told himself, "If I have survived this long, then maybe I was meant to survive even more." When he turned 18, Bello stood tall like a young man, ready for the world. The orphan boy abandoned in a forest was gone. In his place was someone stronger, tougher, and wiser, molded by hardship. He no longer trembled at rejection, no longer broke down in tears when villagers whispered. He had learned that life would not always give you kindness, but it could give you lessons. On his 18th birthday, which passed quietly with no celebration, Bello sat outside the hut at night, looking at the stars. He thought of Mr. Johnson, of Aliya, of the orphanage, and of all the years that had shaped him in Kokodi. His chest was heavy, but his heart was not as weak as before. He whispered, "God, if there is still a plan for me, I am ready. I have walked through fire, and I am still alive." Uncle Gogo, seated beside him, listened quietly. The old man nodded slowly, his bent back leaning on his stick. He had watched this boy transform from a hopeless child into a man of strength. And though he carried a secret in his heart, he kept it still. The time was not yet right. The night breeze blew gently over them, carrying with it the sound of crickets and the distant laughter of the village. Bello closed his eyes, ready for whatever lay ahead, not knowing that the true battle of his life was yet to begin. After a long silence, Uncle Gogo cleared his throat. "Bello," he said softly, his voice trembling with both age and weight. "You have become a man now. I have kept something from you for many years. Tonight, it can no longer stay hidden." Bello turned to him, surprised. "What is it, Baba?" The old man sighed deeply, his eyes glistening in the firelight. "You see me as just an old villager, but long ago, I was not like this. I once walked in the city, in Lagos, as a man of power. I was among those who founded the Johnson Group of companies with your father. Mr. Johnson." Bello's heart jumped. He sat upright, his eyes wide. "You knew my father?" "Yes," Uncle Gogo nodded slowly. "Very well. We were friends, partners, and brothers in vision. We started from small shops, building, struggling, until the company grew into a giant. But when wealth came, I chose to leave. I did not want riches to spoil my old soul. I came back to the village with my share, small but enough. Yet I remained close to your father in trust." Bello's breath quickened. He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Uncle Gogo reached for a small wooden box hidden under his mat. With shaky hands, he opened it. Inside were folded papers, yellowed with time, but carefully kept. He brought them out and placed them in Bello's hands. "These are the real documents, the true will of Mr. Johnson. He gave them to me before he died." Bello's fingers trembled as he unfolded the papers. The words on them were clear. "I, Johnson Adderwale, hereby declare my adopted son Bello as my only heir. All properties, shares, and businesses shall belong to him upon my death." Bello's eyes blurred with tears. He read the words again and again, hardly able to breathe. "Me? The only heir? But why did he not tell me? Why did he leave me to suffer like this?" Uncle Gogo leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Because your father knew his wife's heart. He saw the jealousy in her eyes, though she tried to hide it. That is why he left those papers carelessly on the desk in his room. He wanted to test her. He wanted to see if she would rejoice with him in choosing you, or if her greed would rise against you. And just as he feared, she showed her heart. She could not bear the thought of you receiving everything. That is why she poisoned him." Bello gasped, dropping the papers on his lap. The fire crackled louder, as if reacting to the shock. "So, she killed him?" His voice shook with rage and grief. "Yes," Uncle Gogo said, nodding slowly, his toothless mouth tightening. "Your father suspected it might come to that. That is why he gave me these documents in secret. He told me, 'Old friend, if anything happens to me, keep these safe. When the boy becomes a man, give them to him. Let him reclaim what is his.'" Bello covered his face with his hands. Memories of Mr. Johnson flooded back. His laughter, his lessons, his kind words. The pain of his death burned fresh in his chest. "All these years, I thought he just died suddenly. I did not know she—" His voice broke, and he wept like a child. Uncle Gogo placed a wrinkled hand on his shoulder. "Cry, my son. A heart that carries pain must let it out, but do not let sorrow blind you. Your father's legacy is waiting for you. The Johnson Group of companies is drowning under the greed of Aliya. If you do not rise, everything he built will die." Bello wiped his tears slowly. He looked again at the papers in his hands. For the first time in years, his heart felt a strange mixture: pain, anger, but also purpose. He whispered, "So this is who I am. This is what I was meant to be." "Yes," Uncle Gogo said firmly. "You were never a hopeless boy. You were never a mistake. You are the heir, chosen by the man who loved you as his own son. And now it is time. We will go back to Lagos together. I will stand beside you, and with these papers, no one can deny who you are." Bello looked at the old man, his eyes shining with determination. "But will they accept me after all these years? Will they not laugh and call me a liar?" Uncle Gogo smiled faintly, his wrinkled face glowing in the firelight. "They may laugh at the beginning, but truth always stands in the end. The wind can cover the sun for a while, but it cannot stop it from shining." Bello held the papers tightly to his chest. For the first time since he was abandoned, he felt strength rising inside him that was not from farming, not from hardship, but from destiny. His father's bloodline, may not have flowed in his veins, but his father's choice now lived in his hands. That night, he did not sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the hut, dreaming of Lagos, the tall buildings, the shining lights, the company his father had built. He imagined walking through its doors, no longer as an orphan or a stranger, but as the rightful heir. His heart beat fast, not with fear this time, but with resolve. By morning, Uncle Gogo prepared his old bag, putting together herbs, food, and the most important treasure, the will. "We will leave soon, my son," he said. "The city awaits you. The legacy of your father awaits you, and the time of truth has come." Bello stood tall in the doorway, the sun rising behind him. The boy who was once abandoned in the forest was now ready to walk back into the city, not as a beggar, but as the son of Mr. Johnson, the heir who had been hidden, but not forgotten. The morning they set out for Lagos, Bello felt both fear and strength in his heart. For 4 years, he had lived in Kokodi, sweating under the sun, carrying burdens heavier than his body, and learning survival through pain. Now, with the will in his hands and Uncle Gogo beside him, he was no longer the orphan boy abandoned in the forest. He was walking toward his destiny. The journey was long. They traveled by old buses, moving from dusty village roads to highways crowded with cars and trailers. Bello looked out of the window at the changing scenery. The huts and farms gave way to tall buildings, busy markets, and finally, the restless noise of Lagos, the city he once knew as home. His heart beat faster with every passing mile. Uncle Gogo, though bent in back and slow in movement, held his stick firmly and whispered encouragement. "Do not fear, my son. Lagos is a lion, but you are no longer a goat. You are a lion, son, and today you will roar." At last they arrived at the tall glass building that carried the name Johnson Group of Companies. Bello stood in front of it, staring at the letters. Memories flooded back. Mr. Johnson's laughter, the nights in the mansion, the lessons in the study. His eyes grew wet, but he blinked the tears away. "This is mine," he told himself. "This was my father's dream, and I will not let it die in the hands of a thief." Inside, the office was busy. Workers moved quickly, phones rang, and files were carried up and down. Some looked up when they saw the young man and the old villager enter, curious but confused. They had heard whispers over the years about the boy Mr. Johnson once loved, but most had believed Aliya's version of the story, that he was gone forever. Aliya herself sat in the chairman's office, dressed in expensive lace, gold glittering on her neck and wrists. She had grown heavier, her face proud, her voice sharp as she commanded the secretaries around. When Bello entered with Uncle Gogo, her eyes widened in shock. For a moment, she thought she was seeing a ghost. "You," she hissed, standing up slowly. "You are supposed to be gone. How dare you walk in here?" Bello's voice was calm but strong. "I am Bello, the son of Mr. Johnson, and I have come for what belongs to me." The room fell silent. Workers whispered at the back, tension filling the air. Aliya burst into laughter, loud and bitter. "You, a boy picked from the orphanage, you dare to stand before me and call yourself heir?" She pointed at him with trembling hands. "Guards! Throw this boy out before I lose my patience." Before the guards could move, Uncle Gogo stepped forward, his bent back shaking but his voice steady. "Stop there. This boy is no liar. I am Gogo, one of the real founders of this company with Johnson. And here," he lifted the wooden box and pulled out the papers, "is the true will of Mr. Johnson, signed and sealed, naming Bello as the only heir." Gasps filled the office. The guards froze, workers craned their necks, and Aliya's smile vanished. Bello walked to the desk, opened the papers, and placed them for all to see. Lawyers were called, and one by one, they examined the documents carefully. They compared signatures, seals, and stamps. Their faces grew serious. Finally, the head lawyer spoke firmly. "These are authentic. This is the true will of Mr. Johnson. Madam Aliya, according to this, you have no rightful claim. The heir of this company and all property is Bello." Aliya's face turned red. She shook her head violently. "No, no, this cannot be. I killed—" She stopped herself, biting her lip, but the words had already escaped her tongue. The workers gasped. The lawyers stared. Uncle Gogo's eyes narrowed. Bello stepped closer, his face hard. "You killed him, didn't you? You poisoned him. You thought no one would know. But God has brought the truth to light." Aliya fell back into her chair, trembling. Her voice cracked as she tried to deny, but the evidence was too much. Rumors had always followed her, and now her own words had betrayed her. Police were called, and before the eyes of everyone, the once proud woman was dragged away in handcuffs, screaming and weeping. Her lace dress and golden jewelry could not cover her shame. As she was taken out, villagers and workers who had once feared her now pointed and mocked. "See her! The mighty has fallen. Greed has destroyed her." She hid her face, but the humiliation was complete. Justice was swift. In court, the poison, the fake documents, and her confession all stood against her. The judge's voice echoed through the room. "Aliya, for the murder of your husband, Mr. Johnson, and for the attempt to steal his legacy, you are sentenced to life imprisonment." The gavel fell, and her fate was sealed forever. Bello sat quietly in the courtroom, tears rolling down his cheeks. He thought of Mr. Johnson, the man who had loved him as a son and believed in him until the end. He thought of the years of suffering, the hunger, the rejection, the loneliness. And now, at last, truth had spoken. Uncle Gogo placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered, "Your father's dream is alive again. You are not the boy abandoned in the forest. You are Bello, the heir, the one chosen not by blood, but by love and destiny." The workers of Johnson Group stood and applauded. They welcomed him, not as a stranger, but as their rightful leader. From that day forward, Bello carried the name with dignity. He was not proud, for he remembered the days of hunger. He was not cruel, for he remembered the sting of rejection. He became a man of justice, determined never to repeat the mistakes of Aliya. The Bible verse Mr. Johnson once quoted came back to his mind, "It is better to have a good name than silver or gold." Bello had now received both a name and a legacy, but more importantly, he had received the strength to carry them with humility. And so the story ended. A poor orphan, abandoned in the forest, rose to become the rightful heir of a great legacy, while the one who let greed and jealousy rule her heart was left to rot in the darkness of a prison cell. Bello walked out of the court that day into the bright sunlight of Lagos, not just as a survivor, but as a living testimony that truth may sleep, but it never dies.
Greed is like fire. It begins small, but when left unchecked, it burns down everything in its path. Aliya allowed jealousy to grow inside her heart until it destroyed her husband, her peace, and her future. But Bello, though abandoned and rejected, endured his suffering and rose to fulfill his destiny. This story reminds us that no matter how dark the night may be, the truth will always find its way into the light. As the Bible says in Galatians 6:7, "Whatever a man sows, that shall he also reap." Aliya sowed envy and reaped shame, But Bello held on to faith and patience, and in the end, he reaped honor. So, my friends, let this story be a lesson. Do not let jealousy blind your heart. Do not let greed poison your soul. Instead, choose kindness, choose patience, and trust that your destiny cannot be stolen. It can only be delayed. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel for more stories filled with lessons of life. And in the comments, tell us, what did you learn from Bello's journey? Remember, truth may sleep, but it never dies. This is African Tales Forever.